Hi everyone, and welcome to our event. My name is Karina Grimberg-Golihov, and I'm the Human Rights Law and Research Officer at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. For the past 20 years, JIJ has been dedicated to advocating for justice and human rights in Israel and the Middle East. And aligned with our mission of promoting awareness and respect for international law, we are gathered here today to address the atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7 and their potential classification as crimes of genocide. We are privileged to have the presence of two experts and a survivor of the October 7th attacks. They will provide both legal and on-the-ground examinations of the attacks to determine whether the actions of Hamas amount to genocide and to explore avenues for genocide prevention. Before I start, just to remind you that we have designated people from our team who are taking pictures, and all the other pictures are not allowed in the room. So we will start with Professor Robbie Sable. Robbie Sable is a visiting professor of international law at the Faculty of Law of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He also holds the title of visiting professor at the Tel Aviv University. Professor Sable is a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague. He served as a legal advisor to the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was a member of the delegation that conducted peace talks with Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinians. He holds the personal rank of ambassador, and his publications include the following titles: Procedure in International Conferences from January 2018, and International Law and the Arab-Israeli Conflict from the year 2022. Professor Sable, it is an honor for us to have you here today.
Thank you, Colin. I don't think it's in dispute that Hamas committed war crimes. The question is, did this amount to genocide? A few words about what they have been doing. They were firing thousands of rockets aimed deliberately at Israeli civilian towns. On the 7th of October, and we'll be hearing more about it later, they blatantly ignored, I think, every norm of morality and of international law, deliberately killing civilians, raping, maiming, and taking hostages. They slaughtered in cold blood over 1,200 Israelis who were at a music festival, and foreign residents as well. They attacked kibbutzim, killed people in their houses, widespread acts of torture. Over 5,500 people were wounded. They burned people alive, rape, sexual assault. One of their beheadings was done on a live victim using an agricultural hoe which they found in one of the kibbutzim. The sexual attacks, by the way, were confirmed by the UN Special Representative, Ms. Patton. They abducted at least nearly 250 hostages, including infants, elderly, entire families, persons with disability, Holocaust survivors, and again, you'll be hearing first-hand account of what happened there. The murderers proudly filmed their own horrific acts. They had little cameras on them. By the way, unknowingly, this has provided us with clear forensic evidence of their crimes. I should add, their crimes also has brought tragedy to innocent Palestinians who've been killed in the ensuing military operations against these terrorists. The question comes back, okay, these are horrible war crimes. Did it amount to genocide? And I should add that Israel has been involved in military conflicts since its creation in 1948. At various times, we were in conflict with the Jordanian Arab Legion, with Syria, with Iraq and Egypt. We had heavy casualties in these wars, and our military cemeteries are a sad witness to that. Nevertheless, we did not characterize these conflicts as genocide. What happened here is different. The crime of genocide, and you'll know this, requires two elements: two evil acts and evil intent. Evil acts and evil intents. And the Genocide Convention reads that genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. It includes killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group. And in addition, Article 3 of the Convention says the following acts should be punishable: genocide, clearly, conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide. So what is needed is both genocidal acts and genocidal intent. And the question is whether this existed for Hamas. And by the way, we, the Jewish people, are well aware what is genocide. We suffered what is perhaps the most horrific genocide in human history when Nazi Germany killed 6 million Jews in what they stated was a deliberate attempt to obliterate the Jewish people. And they nearly succeeded. And it was this Holocaust that was the trigger to the Genocide Convention. What happened on October the 7th was a calculated and heinous attempt to kill Jews just because they were Jews. It was carried out by the Hamas terrorist group as a manifestation of their ideology. And it's their ideology set out in their charter. By the way, and I want to read parts of it, it's difficult to comprehend that decades after the Holocaust, such a document could be adopted. And the charter was adopted in 1988. By the way, it was later supplemented by a more sanitized version in 2017. But Hamas was careful to tell their members this did not replace the 1988 convention, but it only added or supplemented. In other words, the original 1988 convention, according to Hamas, is still in force. And what did it say? A few quotes. On Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. Palestine is an Islamic land. The liberation of Palestine is an individual duty for every Muslim. Jihad becomes individual duty of every Muslim. In the face of the Jews' usurpation, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised. Initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. There is no solution, I'm quoting from their charter, there is no solution for the Palestinian problem except by jihad. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. This is a quotation from the charter. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." And they explain why. And they give what is perhaps the most blatant anti-Semitic declaration that has happened since the Holocaust. I'm quoting again from their charter. The enemies, the Jews, have been scheming for a long time. They've accumulated huge and influential material wealth. With their money, they took control of the world media. With their money, they stirred revolutions. They stood behind the French Revolution. This is news for me. The Communist Revolution, and most of the revolutions we hear about. With their money, they formed, the Jews, secret organizations. You may be surprised to hear what they are. The Freemasons, Rotary clubs, and the Lions, which are spreading around the world in order to destroy societies and carry out Zionist interest. They stood behind World War I. They formed the League of Nations. People in this building should be interested to hear that. Through which they could rule the world. They were behind World War II, clearly, through which they made huge financial gains. There's no war going on anywhere without them having their finger in it. This is the charter of the organization. And they had incurred a lot of criticism of it, so they did a sanitized version, 2017, which again adds to, but doesn't replace it. But even in the sanitized version, we hear the goal is to liberate Palestine and confront the Zionist project. Palestine is an Arab Islamic land. The establishment of Israel is entirely illegal. Hamas rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. And we know what that means. Resistance and jihad will remain a legitimate right. And Hamas affirms the responsibility of the Arabs and the Muslims in the liberation of Palestine from Zionist occupation. This is their sanitized PR version. And if we look at some of the statements they make, it makes quite clear what they intended. Ahmad Yassin, who was the founder of Hamas, said quite clearly, by 2017 there will be no Israel. Yahya Sinwar, who's hiding somewhere in a tunnel at the moment, says the discussion now is about when we will wipe out Israel. Fatih Hamad, the former interior minister, said every Jew possible in the world, so attack every Jew possible in the world and kill them. Sheikh Hamad el-Regeb said, "Oh Allah, bring about annihilation upon the Jews." By the way, they don't talk about Israelis, they talk about Jews. "Oh Allah, paralyze them, destroy their entity, tear them apart, bring upon them a terrible punishment. Oh Allah, enable us to get to the neck of the Jews." Osama Hamdan, senior Hamas leader, said, Hamas has just one no. No to the existence of Israel. And Khazi Hamad, another senior Hamas leader, was asked about what their objective are. He said to get rid of the occupation. He was asked, are you talking about all the Palestinians' land? Does that mean, the question asked, does that mean the annihilation of Israel? Hamad's answer, yes, of course. I was looking at their TV. They have pictures of a children's program, a lovely cuddly little toy doll, and they were asked, what do you want to do? We want to kill all the Jews on a children's program. They've declared publicly for years that sacrificing innocent Palestinian civilians is a key element in their strategy. Fatih Hamad again said, for the Palestinian people, death has become an industry at which women excel, so do all the people living in the land. Their attack on the 7th of October was a tragedy for us. I think it was a tragedy for the Palestinian people. Hamas is warping Islam and is warping the true interests of the Palestinian people. We captured one of the commanders of the Izzeldin Qassam brigade, and in his pocket we found a note addressed to his soldiers which said, Allah has designated you and given you the honor to participate in jihad. Know that your enemy is a disease. This reflects the Nazi ideology, which has no cure except beheading and removing their hearts and livers. And Hamad warned on the radio that the October 7th attack was only the beginning. Hamas would continue to strike Israel until it killed every Jew and destroyed the country. We intercepted a message they were broadcasting one of the terrorists who proudly told his family, I killed Jews with my own hands. It's a obnoxious, virulent ideology which is an intent to commit genocide. By the way, this reflects also some of the views of the Iranian government, which is to supply the majority of the arms and the ammunition to Hamas. Khomeini himself said, the Jews, may God curse them, are opposed to the very foundation of Islam. The former President Ahmadinejad said, there's a horrendous Zionist clan that's been ruling the major world affairs. They've appeared on state television, giving detailed explanations about how Jewish rabbis in Europe used to kill Christian children and take their blood for use during the Passover holidays. This is a libel that we thought had disappeared in the Middle Ages. It hasn't. Mohammed al-Ramin, official advisor to the president, said the resolution of the Holocaust issue, he wanted to dismiss the Holocaust issue, would end in the destruction of Israel. And the co-founder of the Hamas think tank, which is an Iranian prominent think tank, said, a time will come when the Zionist regime will be wiped off the face of the earth. And the final quote is from the deputy commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Ali Fadavi. The shock, he was talking about 7th of October, the shock that the resistance forces strike cause to the Zionists will remain until this cancerous growth disappears from the map of the world. I think what we have here is a clear, not only horrendous acts that were done on 7th of October, but an ideology which is genocidal. I would like to end on a quote from perhaps the leading Israeli writer, David Grossman, who, by the way, is no fan of the present Israeli government. And he wrote in the New York Times, "Israel is the one country in the world whose elimination is most openly called for. Only when it comes to Israel is it acceptable to publicly demand the elimination of a state. It is sickening to think that this murderous hatred is directed solely at a people who less than a century ago were, in fact, almost eradicated. Hamas acted to commit genocide and intended to commit genocide. I appreciate you people coming here because the world should not ignore this." Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Professor Zabel, for these important insights. We have the honor to have Yuval Raphael. She's a 24 years old Israeli citizen who survived the attacks on October 7th. She's originally from the city of Ra'anana in Israel, where she studies acting. Yuval was at the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel when more than 3,000 terrorists from Hamas and other Palestinian groups infiltrated Israel and started shooting, killing, and kidnapping innocent civilians who were only trying to celebrate their lives. Thank you, Yuval, for sharing with us your story today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. They've been talking about genocide and about all of these sorts of things, and well, I can say I've gone through that. I've been there, and I do want to tell you a little bit about it. And I'm sorry if it makes anyone uncomfortable. I was at the Nova Music Festival on the 7th of October. I went there with 4 other of my friends, so we were 5 girls in total. Unfortunately, we were able to party just for 3 hours until missiles started. 6:30 in the morning, we were evacuated from the party. We wanted to get to one of our friends' home. She lives 15 minutes away from the party in a kibbutz called Oraner. So we decided to go to her place, and that led us to connect to the 232 road, which is the road that connects the kibbutz Re'im, where the party was, to kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the kibbutzim that suffered a lot on the 7th. On that road, we were instructed to turn back because there was a possibility of a terrorist blocking one side of the road and also the other. So we didn't take any chances, and we turned back 300, 400 meters, and we saw a bomb shelter, 2 bomb shelters on both sides of the road. We decided to seek shelter there with around 50 people that were there as well. Unfortunately, around 7:15, 7:30 in the morning, terrorists found us inside the bomb shelter, and they shot everyone. I was in the very, very back of the bomb shelter, and I was sitting down. At the beginning, I was holding the hand of some girl that I didn't know. While there was the missiles, she was crying. She was very hysterical, and I was trying to calm her down. Unfortunately, after the first shooting, when I opened my eyes, she was dead on my shoulder. Because I was sitting in the very back and a lot of people were standing up, not expecting us to get shot, a lot of the dead bodies fell on us, the ones that were in the back. The bomb shelter was 4 square meters, and we were around 50 people inside, which means there is no place for 50 people. So we had to be crushed on top of each other. And the way we were positioned, located, arranged with our bodies was the way we're going to stay for the next 8 hours because there is no way to move. During those 8 hours, the terrorists came somewhere between 10 to, I don't know, more than 10 times they've entered the bomb shelter. Each and every time they shot again. At one point they did start throwing grenades. We had one father of a family that was with us in the bomb shelter to be the first one to jump on a grenade. He exploded in front of his daughter. I, at one point, realized that if I want to somehow get out of this situation alive, I would need to protect myself with what I have there, which was dead bodies. I had one that was on my leg that did cause me tremendous pain, but on the other hand, it was the body that was protecting me. What I did was to lean towards her face on my right side. With one hand, I held her hair, the other I put on the wall, and that's how I pulled her head up. I put my head under hers, her cheek on my cheek, and that's how I protected my face. During those 8 hours, I had to whisper my friends' names every 20, 30 minutes just to know that they're still alive. I had to hide under dead bodies. I had to violate their bodies in order to protect myself. I had to watch people die because not everyone just died on the spot. Many of them also were suffering before their lives ended. I had to watch myself getting covered with other people's blood. I had to endure screams and grenade sounds and gunshots. At one point they did burn the outside of the bomb shelter, and we couldn't breathe because all the smoke came inside. And at the very end, when we got rescued, I had to have the dead body that was on my leg to be taken away in order for me to get up. I had to take my shoes off because my feet were swollen. And as I walked to the entrance of the bomb shelter, there was no floor for me to step on, so I had to step on the dead bodies of the people who were killed there in order for me to get out. Many of them were not whole. I remember vividly 2 girls that I had to step on that had their body parts in places they shouldn't have been. When I was evacuated to the Ofakim police station before I went to the hospital, I remember a lot of faces looking at me. So I ran to the bathroom to see what is going on. There was no mirror there, but there was a little shower. So I did wash my hair, and I had to take human skin pieces out of my hair. My leg, when I went to the hospital, because it endured very heavy, the body weight of the dead body, my leg started to spread muscle, and that caused protein to get inside my blood. The kidneys tried to clean it, and that leads to kidney failure, but I had that treated. On my left leg, I still have grenade pieces till this day. They can't be taken out. It's more risky than to live them in. From that bomb shelter, we survived 11 out of the 50 that were there. Five 4 of them are my friends. We were the only ones to get out, all 5 of us. 2 of my friends were hospitalized till 3 weeks ago. 2 of them one of them has 5 gunshots. The other has 1 that went through her knee and that caused severe injuries. We're all here today, and our bodies are healing, but our mental health is in a different place. And yeah, hopefully that helped you realize a little bit of what had happened at the 7th. I am just one person out of somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 people that were in that party. And this is just the tip of it. So thank you for listening and taking your time to being here today. It does mean a lot to me. I don't feel heard very much, and it's a very hard thing to deal with when you have so much pain. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Yuval. I know it's not easy to tell your story in general and also here, so we really appreciate that you're here. Now we will move on to Dr. Sigal Horowitz. And Dr. Sigal Horowitz advises the Clinical Legal Education Center in the area of transitional justice. Her interests are transitional justice, international criminal law, ethics, and anti-corruption. Dr. Horowitz held various positions at the United Nations, including at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the Special Court for Sierra Leone, and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Alongside her UN work, Dr. Horowitz was involved in teaching and academic research in Israel and Germany. She initiated transitional justice programs at the Hebrew University and Tel Aviv University and led experiential study trips to Rwanda and South Africa. Dr. Horowitz, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you all for attending. My talk today will draw both on my practical experience and my academic experience. And I will start with a few words about accountability, and will then focus on the issue of prevention. The concept of genocide can be discussed from different perspectives, including historical, sociological, and legal perspectives. I am an international lawyer who worked on genocide trials in Rwanda. I therefore tend to apply the legal definition to genocide. According to this definition, as we heard from my colleague, when a perpetrator commits certain crimes with an intent to destroy a group as such, the perpetrator could be convicted of genocide, even if he or she did not succeed in destroying the group. We heard Hamas leaders declare their intent to destroy the people of Israel, including through orchestrating the October 7th massacres. But what if some of those who physically committed the massacres on the ground did not share that intent? Maybe they just wanted to kill a lot of Israelis in order to spread fear, in order to seek revenge for some perceived victimhood. Does this make a difference? Should we not hold them accountable for murder or torture or any other crime short of genocide? We all want recognition for our suffering and the suffering of our loved ones, especially when we face mass violence. We sometimes call it genocide, trying to find an appropriate term for unspeakable atrocities. I said earlier that I worked on the Rwanda trials, but I also worked in post-war Sierra Leone on the trials there. And those trials addressed war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in one of the world's bloodiest civil wars that lasted for over a decade and killed over 50,000 people, left many, many people maimed and amputated, displaced over 1 million people, and destroyed the very fabric of Sierra Leonean society. Does it matter that it wasn't a genocide? Does this matter for the victims, for the survivors, for their children? I was there, and I could tell you that what matters is that accountability was established, that victims received justice, and what matters even more both in Rwanda and in Sierra Leone, has to do with the future. Can the society start healing? Can the cycle of violence end? Can the children grow up and have a safe and dignified life? So we need to expand our discussion to all atrocity crimes, and we need to ask how accountability can help prevent more atrocities and pave the way for peace. Why do I speak about peace when we're here to discuss atrocity preventions? Well, war brings atrocities. We see this everywhere. International law requires prosecuting atrocity perpetrators, at least those of them who bear the greatest responsibility. Trials can provide victims with justice and reparations. Trials can modify the voice of victims, especially those who take part in the proceedings. This can be cathartic and therapeutic for victims and help them rebuild their lives and restore their dignity. Trials can also help with prevention. They can convict and punish perpetrators, thereby removing them from the scene and preventing them from committing more crimes. Trials can even deter others from committing crimes. But trials can also impact the broader society that is affected by the crimes in ways that prevent future violations. Trials can establish the truth about past events. Trials can acknowledge historical injustice. Trials could educate future generations about moral choices. They can help draw the line between right and wrong. Those goals are crucial in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But to attain such goals, the mechanisms providing justice must have legitimacy in the eyes of members of both Palestinians and Israelis, and all the subgroups composing those larger groups. The mechanism has to be regarded as objective and fair and cannot be one-sided, a form of victor's justice. If we want an even-handed model of justice, we need to move away from talking only about genocide. We need to look at all other violations committed in the context of the conflict. Focusing only on genocide will obscure other forms of violence that cost many lives, and more significantly, that rob our children of a decent future. We can also expand our idea of accountability to non-judicial accountabilities. For example, a truth commission can be created. This can be less scary, less destabilizing. Yes, this asks a lot from victims, but we can have all the victims in this project, and we can give them a central role. They will play a role in promoting not only justice, but also peace. The idea that justice in the wake of atrocities has a bearing on peace is a central theme of the field called transitional justice. In this field, we look for the kind of justice that can bring peace. We seek to design a process or a mechanism for achieving both justice and peace, a mechanism that can work in the given context. The process or the mechanism needs to be inclusive, participatory, locally legitimate, and put the victims at the center. It should investigate violations, but also address the root causes of violence. We need to be careful. What the leaders of Hamas have done on the 7th of October was genocide, and they should be held to account. Victims should feel that justice is done and that their suffering is acknowledged. But this should not be used to cause more pain, to sow seeds of hate, to flatten the conflict to a binary story where only one group is the victim. This will only serve to perpetuate a conflict and to perpetuate the suffering. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has reached the bottom of the pit. We are in the heart of darkness. Do we want to stay there? Or do we want to finally address the root causes of the violence? Without addressing these root causes, we will never be safe from atrocities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Horowitz, for your intervention. Before I move on to the questions and comments, I would like to mention, because Yuval could only tell part of her story, that we at GIJ have drafted a report that contains all the legal analysis on how the October 7th attack may amount to genocide. And inside this report, you will also find the full testimony of Yuval. as well as other testimonies and material that support these allegations. You will find the report outside. There is also a QR code. That code leads to the full report, which contains pictures that are really graphic, so just warning in case you don't want to see them. And in case you do, you can scan the QR and it will take you to the report. So we will now move on to the questions. And the first one will be Ambassador Merav Elon-Shachar from Israel.
Carolina, and thank you very much to JIJ of Justice for convening us today for this important event. Yuval, I want to thank you personally for coming. I know we've met before. It's not easy to tell your story, but it's extremely important and crucial for people to hear about it. Why? Because it's easier for the human being to move away from October 7th. And it's important for us that people actually remember why we are today in Gaza, why there is a war with Hamas, not with the Palestinian people. And as I said, it's perhaps human nature, sometimes it's on purpose, but it's extremely important that people remember what happened on October 7th. So thank you for doing it, although I know it must be very hard to relive it every time. And I wanted to thank both Professor Sabel and Dr. Horvitz for what you said. I have two questions issues that I wanted to raise. Dr. Horvitz, you raised the issue of Truth Commission possibility and so on. I agree, of course, that the most important thing is accountability. Whatever terminology we give it. But I wonder, how do you see it in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian, the possibility? Because when I look at Truth Commission, I know the Rwanda case very well. It's in Africa, in my past, and I was in Africa actually during what happened in Sierra Leone, in the decade of tragedy there. So I understand, to me, how it works within one state, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not exactly the same. So I was wondering, when you raised it as a possibility, how do you see it actually taking place or applicable to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And Dr. Sabel and Professor Sabel, I wanted to ask about the genocide, whether it amounts to genocide. I understand that the issue with the international law that we've created, the different generations and the different instruments that we have, is that it's applicable to states. Not always the international law knows how to deal well with armed groups and terrorists. That's part of the issue. So I wonder, I personally, when I speak about Hamas, I do speak about their genocidal intent when we speak about it. But how do you see it actually materializing under international law if we are to apprehend the Sinwar, for example? And how would you see it in a practical way? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question, Ambassador. I think that we need to be creative. I think there have been over 40 truth commissions, and they have each looked different, and they each had different mandates, and they had different names. Sometimes they worked alongside a tribunal, like in Sierra Leone. Sometimes they were part judicial, like Gacaca in Rwanda. There's a lot about accepting responsibility, apologizing, and getting off with an alternative punishment. This is a restorative justice approach, but they called them Gacaca courts. So you could have a lot of different concepts of what it is. And I wanted to present the idea of having something alternative that can cast a wider net on types of violence and types of victims. Now, practically, because we're not in an internally conflict per se, how do you do it? There was an initiative called RECOM of all the former Yugoslavia states that And it's been going on now for years, trying to establish a truth commission for all of those states. Because the victim, and it was started by victims groups in the different, in Bosnia and Serbia and different other countries of the region. The process itself was sort of like a step in the direction, because while they're advocating for the commission, they're already doing some of the work within their sort of civil society groups. And they got a couple politicians signing in. It hasn't yet materialized. So concepts and ideas were drawn out and planned, and I think this is an opportunity to think outside the box. And I think that's where you look at the alternative accountability mechanisms and try to design one that fits. Not take a model that exists, but design your own. And I think international community and experiences worldwide would be helpful if Israel would go that way. So I hope this answered your question. Thank
you. Your question is very relevant, Ambassador. One of the long-standing elements of international law is that for certain crimes there is universal jurisdiction. In the old days, this used to be slavery and piracy. Since the end of the Second World War, genocide is now one of the crimes for which there is universal jurisdiction, which means that any state can, and in fact should, prosecute somebody who committed genocide. Therefore, it's highly unlikely that Mr. Sanoir and his friends will be visiting a democratic country, but if they do, they should be prosecuted by that country. And by the way, the Genocide Convention, which of course you're right applies to states, demands that states prosecute such people. So if they are unwise enough to visit any country with an democratic country, they will be prosecuted. I should add that Palestine purported to join the Rome Convention on the ICC, which also gives jurisdiction to the ICC to try any Palestinian citizen, and they claim that they are citizens of Palestine. So there's a good chance that if they leave Gaza and go to any country in the world, they will be, and they should be prosecuted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see Hungary has a question.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for the very important program that you put together. And I would also like to recognize the strength of Yuval. I think it's amazing that you are here and are able to talk about this. I'm sure it requires lots of strength from you. And after the question raised by the ambassador, I have a question to you, if you don't mind. And there are many survivors like you from the Nova Festival and from other parts of Israel. And I'm sure that you were also in touch with them. So after 7th of October, I assume you had the opportunity to meet them. But you can also talk about your own experience. What do you think, what kind of support people like you need in the short term and in the longer term and from home? So local communities, other survivors, your family, organizations like GIJ, from the State of Israel, from the international community. So what are the needs? I think it would be important to see that clearly. And also, for us, I feel that the world should know, should be aware of this in order to be able to help the whole region to somehow have a more stable future in the long term. Thank you so much.
So first of all, thank you for your kind words. And also thank you for your question. I think it's very, very important. For me, I'm still processing everything. I'm still trying to understand what it is that I need. But one thing I can tell you from my experience is that whenever I'm with other survivors, doesn't matter if I know them or I don't, doesn't matter if I know their story or I don't, just being with them in the same space calms me down. I know they understand me without telling them anything. And now the kind of support we get is mostly from civilians, from private groups that do things voluntarily. And they do that to all the survivors, and that's how I meet them, and that's how I have the spaces with them, and that's what just calms me the most. I think also we do get a lot of emotional support there, and also physical support. I did learn that the body holds a lot of trauma as well, which affects you mentally a lot. And sometimes just physical treatment without talking or anything, it does so much mental treatment as well. And also I think the also the recognition of us that it's really hard for us to go back to work or see even not only the future but tomorrow, like to understand what is going to happen with my life tomorrow. Every single day you feel so different, so it's really hard to keep a sustainable job or just like day-to-day life. The simple things of the day-to-day, like they get so complicated now because you don't know how you're going to feel, or so just to acknowledge that and to how did you say it?
Recognize.
Yeah, to recognize that this is part of our process, and sometimes just to help us see the good, like music does that a lot, just being with the friends does that a lot. Yeah, this is what I know I need right now. And yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Thank you.
I don't know if there are any more questions. So thank you everyone for coming to our event today. I think this was a really important discussion. Thank you, Professor Sabel and Dr. Horowitz, and also Yuval. I know it's not an easy conversation, but we really appreciate your intervention. And again, you're more than welcome to take the report and to also approach us with any more questions that you may have or anything you want to know about our organization and our initiatives, including this work that we do on this topic and other topics that we're working on. Thank you.